again, this is what everyone's using, so everyone should be starting from this point. So you have things like the student ID, the age, the height, the zip code, grade in 3 classes, interest from 1 to 10 in 3 classes, number of siblings, and their favorite food. So this is great, but this data is not organized very well, right? Not really that easy to look at and read. So one thing you notice is in this column and this column, these 3 columns, the title is pretty wide, and even it doesn't fit in this one. But there's really no reason for it to be that wide, right? So we only have this one number in here, and our width of our column is huge. So what you can do is you can drag this and make it smaller. If you were to double click in between 2 letters or 2 numbers on the rows or columns, you can click and drag to make it whatever width you want. Or if you double click, it will make it so it perfectly fits all the data in that column. So as you can see here, the title is this wide, so it fits to this size. If I do it over here, it'll make it wide because it's a long title. You can also click between the 1 and the A in the top left corner, and that will select everything, right? It's very similar to, or it's similar to Control A, but it's not because it doesn't highlight the rows and columns. That just highlights the cells. So if you click between 1 and A, you'll see there's a green on mine for all the numbers and letters. So now if you double click between any of them, it will automatically size all of your columns. So it automatically fit this in, this in, this in, so you can see they're all perfect. Also, you can highlight them all, and if you grab one and drag it, and you make it, this is 163 pixels, so you can make it smaller, every single column will be that width. So if everything's selected by clicking up here in the top left corner, and then you change the width of something, it'll change everything to that width. Right? Double clicking will change them all to what they need to be, and then dragging will make them all uniform, which is maybe what you want. Right? But some of these things do overlap. So how can we still see this, right? This is kind of annoying because I can't see that whole thing. You can make a shorter title, but probably the best thing to do is to highlight this row, right? Not the entire row, but just the data you want to do. One thing about doing like columns, if you do this and you add a background color to it, that background color will go forever. And it's going to be really annoying when you try to print your thing. And you basically have to do that whole section over any formatting you had. So most of the time you want to just do the row itself, like the actual data. So click and drag. And there's a button up here to align. You can see you can pick from like just 45 degrees clockwise or counterclockwise, or go vertical rotated. And then at the bottom, there's a format cell alignment that will bring up this window. And this has a lot of stuff. This is probably the most useful thing because it's all in one place. You've got stuff you can do with the number, the font, all the stuff you might have up here, like you would do in Word, borders, fills, that kind of stuff. Another way to get there is to right click. And when in doubt, highlight something and right click, and you probably have tons of options in today's apps. So there is one towards the bottom called Format Cells, and this will just bring up that window again. So if I want to do alignment and I don't want to just do 45 degrees, you can, choose your own. So maybe you want to go 60 degrees. Another thing in here is called wrap text. You can merge cells and shrink to fit. Don't use those yet. We'll go over merge cells in a second or tomorrow. But wrap text, which is also right here at the top if you have your window big enough. And basically that just says if it's too long, just move it to the next line. So if you have a really wide cell, it might just go all the way. But then if you shrink it, instead of cutting it off, move and stuff that overlaps to the next line. So I'm going to click that. So there you go. Perfect, right? No, obviously not. So now you can double click between the rows, or you can click and drag, and you can see that it might need to be a little bit taller. So right now, it looks like most everything is on 2 lines. You can adjust this to see what works the best for you. Right. So now some of these are on 3 lines. It's up to you how you want to how to do those. You can change the size, the font, obviously, all that stuff. If you do want to change the font from the default Calibri, you can click up here or do a Control A, and then just go in here like you would in Microsoft Word and just pick something. So that's great. Looking better already. Maybe you want to take some of these numbers and instead of having them all aligned to the left, maybe you want to center all the ones in the middle here. So you can just highlight. Again, hopefully this is pretty intuitive. And then you can just click center like you would in Word. This is still going to be pretty smushed together. Well, not smushed together, but it's going to be hard to read because these gray lines that you see here, these are only on Excel. These aren't in, if you print it or save it as a PDF, you don't actually see these lines. There's a button to say show those lines when you do print it, but they're not going to look good. So another thing we can do is we can add some borders to our data. And there's a couple of ways to do this, just like it was for angle text. There's a little button here with borders, so you can pick these default ones. You can draw them, or more likely you want to go to more borders, which guess what is the same thing as right-clicking and saying format cells. So I want to highlight, let's start with all of my data. And then I'm going to right-click, format cells. And then this gives you a couple options. You can say, what color is my line? You can say, what does my line look like? And then you can say, where does it go? So I might want to take this like dotted line here, and then I might want to say, just put it in the, put it basically everywhere, but not on the outside, right? So this is just the border of what's highlighted. This is everything else. And then you can say, oh, I just want the top of this, which in this case would be this line. I could do just the verticals, which would just be obviously up and down. You can cross through them, but for me, I'm going to click inside. You can see a preview here. You can also click in here to turn them on or off. I like to use these buttons though. And then if you click OK, now you can see all your borders. So again, these borders out here won't show up. You can always make this bigger if you need to. And then maybe I want to take, maybe I want a solid line right here as well. So you can just highlight whatever you want. So you can highlight this stuff and say, just give me the top. Or you can highlight this stuff and say, just give me the bottom. So format cell, maybe I want this, maybe I want a thick line here. I can say just the bottom. All right, you can see there already is a bottom, but I want to replace that with a thick one. And there you go. You can always play around with this too. So you have alignment as well. So you probably want it to be in the middle of the cell and probably closer to the bottom. Right? Maybe you have some situation where you want it on the top, but probably not. So already looking a little better, right? We haven't even done anything to the data yet. We haven't deleted anything. So in the directions, it says you're more than welcome to add rows or columns. You can change the name of them. So if you want to change how old to age or, you know, zip code, instead of being all caps, just change it to normal. You can change all that stuff. And you can also delete rows. So if you don't want zip code, you can right click on the actual column letter. So if you're trying to do something to a whole column or row, make sure you're on the number or letter. And you can either hide it, which is still there, it's just hidden between here. As you can see, it jumps from C to E. You can say unhide to get rid of it, or to get it back. Or you just delete it completely. And if you delete it completely, it'll just push everything back over. So you don't necessarily have to use all this data, but you're more than welcome to, or you can add stuff. So maybe it's still hard to read. So if we look here, we have stuff about how old they are, their height, their zip code. So there's like personal information. Then we have their grades. So grade in CSP, grade in chemistry, and grade in literature. So maybe you want to make that stand out. So you can go to your paint bucket here. You can also right click and go format cells, but you can pick maybe a color that shows their grade. So maybe like you can go to more colors. So you can pick what you want. You could always go over here and say I want it to be really light. Or you can pick one of the defaults. Doesn't really matter. Let's go with this color. And then the same thing, you can do it with interest too. If you want to make it stand out, you can just pick a different color. So now you can see, well, these are my grades. You can always delete this if you need to. These are my grades and these are my interests. And that would be, this is just regular formatting, right? This is like the stuff you can do in Word, which again, hopefully is pretty intuitive. So when in doubt, all right, so if you want this to be separated a little bit, you can right click, format cells. The one thing you can't do with like Google Sheets is you can't like say, I want this border or this border. So I can say, click the double line, put it just on the right side. So now it kind of is separated. Maybe I want this to stand out too. Right click, format cells. Maybe I want a thick line over here. just to make it separated from the other data. So already looking a little easier to read, right? Maybe you want to bold some stuff. You can use these tools up here to bold things, just like you would in Word. So there we go. So that is just regular formatting. The next thing is going to be conditional formatting. So one thing with the formatting is make it consistent, right? I don't want some random like border just like on some of the cells, like right here. So make sure it's consistent, right? So if you have a double thick line, make sure it goes all the way down the column, or just make sure it's uniform. So some people just, you know, don't have a border on like this one line, which doesn't make any sense. So just make things consistent and uniform. So conditional formatting, easiest way to do it, there's a drop down right here. And then they have some preset ones, and you can see like things that are greater than a certain value or between it or equal to, or the top 10% or above the average. You can do data bars, which give you like little bars of like almost like a mini graph on your actual cell, which can be good, but if you overuse it, it's definitely cluttered. You can do color scales. So the first thing you would want to do is you would want to highlight your data. So you wouldn't want the label in there. And you can highlight them, and then you can hover over this and you can see what it's going to look like. So red, white, and blue color scale. So red's the highest, and blue is the lowest, and white is kind of neutral. Here's one that makes more sense probably for grades, right? Green's the highest. You can also go in there and say, change it. So 0 is the most red and 100 is the most green. I think by default it says the lowest value in this set is the darkest red and the highest value is the darkest green. So you can adjust those by going to more rules. You can do icon sets, right? You can say, well, these things are good, these things are bad. You can do little Wi-Fi signals and stuff like that. Some of them make sense for this, some of them don't. So you could say, go in here and you can say, I want to take all the grades. And again, I'm only in one column here, greater than, or grades in CSB. And I can say, take everything above the average and then make it look a certain way. So you can say everything above the average, I want to make green with green font, and you can click OK. So now it's obvious which ones have the highest grades in this. If you want to change that, you can always go to manage rules. So again, a lot of this stuff should be just you clicking around and figuring it out. You can always download this stuff again if you need to, but I want to go to the entire worksheet, and then there's my rule, and it tells you exactly where it is. You can click on it, it will highlight it. Or you can double click it and it gives you way, way more options now. So you can say above a certain, right? You can say above a standard deviation, right? You can say above 1 or 2 standard deviations. Right here you have format. So maybe in addition to making it green, you want to change the font, right? Or maybe you want to make it bold. So I can say make it bold and also put a border around it. So maybe you take a solid border that's, I don't know, let's just go with this really dark green and then say on the outside. So if you click OK now, you'll see that hit OK. Now it's bold and it has a border around it. Is that good? I don't know, probably not, because it messes this border up, but you can do stuff like that. So it doesn't have to be the default, and I prefer that you search through here and figure out things you can do and not just use defaults. Another thing you could do is if I wanted all of this data, right? So all my likes. So I would be careful, because if you're doing the average, it's going to take the average across 3 classes, which you probably don't want. So this one might make sense to highlight cells that are greater or less than a certain value. So maybe I say less than, and then I guess this is probably, I'm guessing this is the average, I don't know, but less than 5.5, that's fine. So if it's less than 5.5, or you can do just less than 5. Right, if you want to make sure it's less than or equal, you might just want to add 5.1. You couldn't go back and manage rules, but for now, I'm just going to do that. So now quickly, I can see all the things that are less than 5. And the nice thing about these formattings are, if you change a value, like make this 800, then you can see that this takes the average way up. So now the average is above 100. So it's the only thing that is green. So if this is 120, it changes things around, right? If this is 0, it brings the average lower. So now more things are green. So you don't have to do anything. It automatically updates all that for you, which is kind of cool. So if you change this to 2, it's red automatically. Or if you make this 0, it's red automatically. So once you do it, it's kind of nice because you don't have to do it again. So play around with conditional formatting. There's a bunch of different things you can do in here. You could also do like words too. So that is conditional formatting. And then you can say like text containing. So you can say text containing hot dogs. And there you go. It automatically knew what I wanted. You can hear me. Scary. And then you can just do a border. You can decide what it's going to look like. But maybe your data you want to show like, well, liking hot dogs relates to a higher score in a certain class, right? I don't know what you're going to show me yet. So that is conditional formatting. So now we're going to look at functions. So remember, functions are the pre-made formulas in Excel. So there are some up here in the menu. Depending on how wide your screen is, you might not be able to see them in the dropdown. But there's like sum, average, min, and max, which counts how many numbers there are. So funny enough, these are the 4 that you actually need, or some of the ones you actually need for your project. You'll need an if statement too, but we're going to do that tomorrow. You can go to more functions as well, or you can click on this f of x right here, and this will bring up your insert function. If you already know the name of it, you can just type it in without going there. So if you know the name is average, you can say equals av, and then you can see it's average. Either hit tab, and you can see a description of it, or double click it. And then it'll say, what is your range? And then you can highlight the data you want the average of. And there it is. So 88.9666667. So repeating. So you have to do this to this one, and then this one, and then this one, and then this one, and then this one. It's super annoying, right? Well, hopefully a lot of you already know that. If you hover over a cell, you can click on it. If you hover over one of the edges of the borders, you can move it. But if you get this little dot in the bottom right corner, your icon changes to a black cross without the arrows. So you can actually click on this, and this is autofill. You can drag this over as far as you want, and it will automatically do whatever you did here to all these different rows. So if you notice, this one's E2 through E31. This one automatically knew that you were just going across columns. So it changed to E to an F. And then if you look all the way over here, now it's K2 to K31. So it actually will automatically fill those things for you. Speaking of consistency, if I see this, you're going to lose like 5 points off the bat. If I see like decimal points that are like 1 here and 0 here and like 5 here, that's not consistent. So you can highlight those. You can go into format cells, but the easiest way is up here to change the numbers. So you can say, I want more or less decimal points. So maybe you just want 1 or 2. You can decide what you want. Maybe you want to make these bold as well. So one thing is kind of annoying. I have all these borders coming down and it's not consistent. It's just sitting there. Maybe that's what you want. That might be fine. But if you wanted to continue on with this formatting, you can actually autofill, which obviously is not what I just wanted. But if you click on this little thing, it pops up in the bottom right corner. You can say fill with just the formatting. So now if you look, my borders all came down. So now I can go back and I don't have to do this again. Oops, wrong way. And I could bold it again. And now if you wanted to, you could highlight this and add that border. Maybe you want this double line, kind of like an equal sign up down there. So now that's consistent, those borders. Maybe you didn't want the borders, that's fine too. You can make it. I've seen people just do it where it's like a little box down here with no borders. So you can make it look however you want. So that is a function and how you can autofill it. So you also need, I believe you need sum and min and max. They don't all have to be across a row, right? So you can say the max score. So over here, you could literally say equals max, and then you can highlight all of your grades and hit enter. So the max score out of all your grades is 100. You can say equals min, and then highlight all your grades again. And this is throughout all the classes. And hit enter, and it would be 78. Obviously, if you leave it like this, it's gonna be good because I can't tell what it is. So you would give it a label, like highest score, highest grade out of all classes, lowest grade out of all classes. So make sure you label things, right? You can make this its own little thing, right? You can make it solid. You can put a border around it. You can make it over here. And if you wanted to, you can align this however you needed to. Maybe align it over here. Maybe it doesn't need to be so wide. There you go. Maybe you want to put some more borders in there. It's up to you. And you'll also see that even though I'm moving these cells, it actually will keep the same grades in there. So it might be something like that. It's up to you how you want to do those. So tomorrow we're going to look at the if statement, which is a function, which is pretty easy. It's just if it's this, do one thing. If not, either do nothing or do something else. But we're going to do it like we did the else if statement, where it's got to be more than 2 things, so at least 3 things. So we have to actually put an if statement inside of an if statement. So it's not that easy to do it using the graphical version. You basically have to type it in. So we'll go over that. But since we already went over if statements, hopefully it should be easier. So let me show you one more. Let me show you one more thing. So one problem with this is I don't have a title on here yet, which maybe you want to wait until the very end to put a title on it. Again, you can change sizes and stuff anytime you want. But if you want to put something in above this or to the right, or even in between any of these cells, you can right click on the either column letter or the row number, and you can say insert. So if you're on the actual column letter or the row number, so not just the cells over here, and you say insert, it'll automatically insert a row above it or to the left. And then you can decide, do you want the formatting to be the same as above or below, or do you want any formatting at all? So what a lot of people try to do is they try to guess like, where's the center of this, and put a title in here. And then if you have anything else, it'll cut it off. So you can say my title here. All right, you can make this bold and big if you want. But it's really annoying because people try to put like spaces in here to make sure it's centered. So instead of doing that, if you put it in the first cell over here and you highlight the whole set of data, so maybe you have graphs, that's why maybe you want to wait until you're done. But you can say right here, there's a button called merge and center. This merges the cells into one long cell. So it's going to go from A1 to M1, and there's nothing in between. And it also will center it. So there you go. And you'll see that it goes from A1, and then as you go over 1, now it just jumps to M1. So there's no B1, C1. So just that row is one big block of cells. So you can wait until the end for that one if you want. All right, so you have formatting. You, again, are more than welcome to change the names here if you want to make them a little different. You can add a row if you wanted to, or a column. You can delete columns, right? So if you don't need their height. But, you know, like we saw on the spurious correlations and what we did yesterday, you can say, oh, well, if they're 16 and they're below a certain height, then clearly they're going to do well in CSB. So you can try to find trends that are similar by looking at that data. And again, how are you going to find that? Well, you might start using conditional formatting to see which ones align. Or maybe when we get the graphs tomorrow, you'll graph some things and notice that, well, these look similar. All right, any questions? On eClass, there is the